Guys, it is so good to be here. I've been thinking and praying about this for a long time, and I desperately wanted to talk about the journey of how myself and my wife Brie, how we got here. And I was really excited to do that, and I basically spent an entire week wrestling with God, like Jacob wrestled with God, and he put something else on my heart. And today, what I'm actually going to be sharing with you, still real stories, still real faith, but not so much the story of how I got here to this position, but actually the story of my childhood, but particularly what it's like to be a pastor's kid, and what it's like to be in ministry as a child of one who is in ministry. And it's really funny because it's something that I think on paper, I think a lot of people, I mean this with all humility, would have been quite jealous of my upbringing. That actually would have been like, well, I wish I was born into a home like yours, with a mother and a father that love me very much. They're here today. They're absolute legends. This is Paul and Joe Ryan. If you haven't met them, that's them just there.
I'm proud.
So proud. That's awesome. And so as part of that, I might just jump straight in and we'll learn as we go. But for me, ministry is all I've known. Is the only path I've known. So I was born in Townsville in 1994. So that's in North Queensland. I'm 27 years old. And lived there for the first 6 years of my life. And around that time, my parents were approached. They were senior pastors of a local church, but they were approached to plant something called LL Ministries here in Australia. So LL Ministries is an international discipleship ministry with focus on healing and inner wholeness. And so we as a family of 5 at that time, me and my 2 brothers, moved over to England for mum and dad to be trained. And then we moved back, not to Townsville, but to Sydney for them to plant the base out in Menangle. And I lived there for the rest of my kind of childhood years. And I've actually just recently moved back into there because my wife, Brianna, has just landed a job as their new house manager, which is super exciting. And as to how I got this job, well, that's for another time. But ministry is all that I've known. So I try and paint the picture of what I would call like a textbook sheltered Christian child would look like for me. My entire schooling was Christian education. 2 years in Townsville, 2 years in England, and then the remaining 10 years at Broughton Anglican College just down the road. I gave my life to Jesus at the ripe age of 4. I wasn't sure if that counted when I heard a chapel talk in year 5, so I re-gave my life to Jesus on the bus just in case. I had a very strong moral compass growing up that actually it used to be if I witnessed a fight, and by if it was daily because it happened all the time, but if I witnessed a fight between my siblings, if I saw it, Dad would just ask me what happened, and whatever I said was law because he knew I couldn't lie. And that lasted until I tried to go against it once and, well, I couldn't lie, so he read through it straight away. But the privilege was over. I've been able to personally hear God speak prophetically from age 10 and give prophetic words from age 11. I even used to have a teacher at school who would make every other student do homework except for me. And she would be like, oh, but Matthew's such a darling angel. He doesn't have to do homework. It's fine. And my mother used to say, my Matthew David, he doesn't give me any grey hairs. And I think that on paper would seem like the kind of Christian child, I guess, that you're trying to raise. But actually, on a surface level, I think that's awesome, but my heart was not right. And actually, as you'll learn as I continue to talk, is actually just how much I'd learned to play a system. But actually, my relationship with God was was basically non-existent. And what happened, a key event for me, I found that it's only when things don't go your way that you actually come to find what you really think about something. And so for me, I have this glaring memory in my mind. I was about 15 years old and my older brother was about 17. And I was still, the perfect child at that point, whatever that means. But he really wasn't. He was that rebellious pastor's kid. And he's going out doing stuff. And that never really affected me until now. And he wasn't being very nice to me and my siblings. And I was so desperate for mum and dad to come in with like the hammer of justice, kind of like and put him in his place because it was really affecting me. and my brothers. And one day he went too far and they finally stepped in, and I remember them taking him into their room, into their bedroom to talk to him. I'm just like, he is gonna get it. Like, I was so excited, for justice to be served. And the next day, like, I don't see him for the rest of the night. The next day we go to school and he doesn't come in the car with us. I'm like, man, he got roasted. Like, he got absolutely fried. I cannot wait to find the carcass when I get home. And I ended up finding out that he didn't go to school because Dad took him to the movies and shouted him Maccas. And I was absolutely filthy. I was absolutely livid. And there was no love in my heart for him. No love in my heart for him. And actually, the truth is that I was scaringly similar to a famous character in a very famous parable in the Bible, but a character that you actually don't want to be similar to. And so you may know the story of the prodigal son, and if you don't, I'll quickly illustrate it for you. Back in Jesus' time, he told a story where there was a father who had 2 sons, and the younger of the 2 sons, he said, "Dad, can I have my inheritance now?" Which in that day and age is code for, I actually would rather you be dead, because when you die, I get your estate and I get money. So asking for the inheritance is basically like, Dad, you're great, but I'd rather you be dead so I can have my money. And in that day and age, the father, by law, is actually able to kill that son for the disrespect and the dishonor brought into the family. But he doesn't. He gives the son the money and he runs away to a foreign country and he squanders it. He squanders it and he comes back begging. Has no other option, and he's like, I'm either going to be killed by my dad when I come home, or maybe he'll let me work as a slave, he'll let me work as a servant. And this son comes back and he has a speech prepared, but the father, he just gives him a big hug, gives him a robe, gives him a ring, and throws a party for him. And the older son finds this out through a servant. And the older son is scaringly similar to me in this story with my brother. So I'll just read the chunk from Luke 15:28-30. And it says that the older brother was angry and would not go inside. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, "All these years I have slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you've told me to do. And in all that time, you never even gave me one goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when one of your sons comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf." And for me, that's exactly like, I didn't live in that culture. I couldn't care much for a young goat. I would have no use for one. But actually, that's what it felt like. I was like, in my mind, I didn't have language for this, but I was like, I'm only doing the right thing to leverage a result that I want. And I only knew that when I didn't get the result that I wanted. It's so easy on paper for the oldest son here to think that he is the exemplary child because he's working all day, he's working really hard, he never sets a foot wrong. But actually, he doesn't delight in what the father delights in. He just wants to work a system to get what he wants. He's basically saying, if I had known I could have run away, slept with prostitutes and come back and you'd throw me a party, I would have done that. But I thought that by staying here and working hard for you, that's what I would get. And I didn't use that exact language, but that is how I thought. I just didn't know that for many, many years. And this really started a season and era for me, probably about 7 or 8 years, of a lot of anger and resentment and bitterness and really entitlement. And I couldn't work out what was going on, but really it was God, the Father, trying to show me, Matt, you actually don't know me. You actually just are very good at working a religious system and playing the part, but you actually don't know me at all. And these events kept coming up, God giving me an opportunity to be like, I want to know you, son. Like, come back. Like, this is the time. But they just made me more angry. And I just got more resentful and more bitter. And so for me, this really built and built and built until about 7 years later, God finally got my attention, which how much I didn't know him. And to give you a quick picture, it's 2016. So I've just finished my filmmaking degree, and all of my worth was tied up in that. But I've finished and realized that actually I'm not the next Steven Spielberg, and I don't have any job prospects. And to be quite honest, I wasn't very good at it. I know, terrible, right? Thanks, Mum. I appreciate your support. And so I'm wrestling with this. And and also had just gone through a terrible breakup. And this is the lowest of low points for me. And I lost a lot of friendship groups in that time and in this area. And so I was desperate to get out of here. And so I started attending a connect group in Hillsong, up in the hills, had a family friend that connected me. And I was so hungry. Like I was so hungry to get out of this area, but I was actually feasting on God really for the first time. And I actually calculated it from the 4 times I would go up a week. So from Menangle to Castle Hill, and Menangle to North Rocks for the Bible study, I was doing about 470 kilometers a week. Like I was so hungry to connect with God. And this one week for this Bible study, it was a discussion night, and the topic was, what do we think on how does the Bible and science, like how do they relate to each other? Are they compatible? Are they not compatible? It wasn't a completely Christian group, so it was more so discussion-based and here is the hard truth. And so I just wanted to know what everybody thought. And I came in not really thinking too much about it, but I'm excited when it comes to my chance to share, because I'm like, man, I can just show how smart I am. And so I guess to my chance to share, and I said, in the Bible, it says that, and I realized that the exact words coming out of my mouth were a direct quote from my dad. And I had never read this passage. And I realized I actually have no idea if this is actually true. And I literally trailed off in the middle. People were like, Matt, are you okay? And I just straight up lied and said, I just remembered I have to do something when I get home. But I was actually triggered. I was like, oh my goodness, I do not know if any of this is true. I've never actually checked. I was able to quote scriptures, but really when I thought about it, I would go to mum and dad and say, hey, what do you think about marriage and divorce? And they'd be like, well, in Matthew 19, it says, and I go, oh, no, I don't care about that. Just tell me what you think. And I was so convinced that that would be the best way to do it. And I realized I never actually checked for myself. And this started this phase and this time of just questioning in a really good way everything. I was like, does the Bible say tithing is good? I don't know. I haven't read it. And then go and checking that out. Or does the Bible say sex before marriage isn't good? I don't know. I've never actually read it. And me checking everything. And this started really my discipleship journey. But if I can sum it up really, really well for what was going on, in John 4:23 in the NLT, it says, but the time is coming, indeed it is here now, when true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him this way. And for me, it was a system that I'd learned, and I had a bunch of encounters. I had heard God speak, and I had given prophetic words, but it wasn't grounded in anything. It was actually grounded in no truth. It was grounded in hearsay. It was grounded in what others had said, but I didn't know. I had no idea. And so that just festered and built, and by the end of the year, I was signed up to do Hillsong Bible College. And I thought I would do the full 3 years, but God had other plans, and I just did 1 year of Hillsong Bible College, and then God actually took me to do a discipleship school in Melbourne. And I guess you could say at this time, you would safely assume that my faith is probably my own at this stage. But actually, when I look back, if I could sum up my experience at Hillsong in one word, I would say offended. And actually, it was me just getting chronically offended at everything I heard. And then I went to Melbourne, and the experience wasn't much different. And yes, I was growing. Yes, I was learning. I was more so cataloging things so that I could destroy people in arguments later with the knowledge that I had, rather than letting it actually for me to feast on it and let it transform me and change me. But it wasn't until I was in Melbourne, and about 8 weeks into the course there, they do this brilliant exercise. It sounds a bit strange, but it was probably one of the most, if the most powerful God encounter I've ever had. And they do this exercise. It's about 8 weeks into the course, and it's based off when Elijah calls Elisha. It's based off when Elijah calls Elisha. I don't have a slide for it, but I'll just quickly tell you what's going on. So Elisha is a farmer. Elisha is farming. He's in the field doing his 9-to-5 type work. And Elijah rocks up, and he's like, it's time. And he says, let me kiss my mum and dad goodbye, and then I'll come with you. And he goes and he kills all the cows and he puts on a massive feast for everybody. And he grabs his stuff and he leaves. It might sound like a really strange thing to do, but for Elisha, in that moment, he was burning plan B. He was burning plan B. That for him, he was burning it so there was no other option. It's like, I know that God has put on my heart to follow this man, to be discipled by this man. I will become his assistant, and I don't want anything of my old life holding me back. So I'm going to burn literally all of my cows. I have no income now. All I have is relying and trusting on God to provide in this season. And so at this course in Melbourne, at about week 8, to give you some time to get in, they have this ceremony called burning the plough, or burning the cows. I feel like that doesn't sound as good, but burning the plough. And it was for you to find anything in your life, either physical or metaphorical, that has the ability to hold you back in your journey with God, for you to basically, in front of the class and in front of witnesses, to pray a prayer to God and to burn that thing. And I was praying for weeks about this. Like, I took it really seriously, and I'd heard stories from previous years, and heard like people burnt some crazy stuff. Like someone, real idolatry was riding their motorbike, and they had felt from God to give it up for a year. And so I thought that would just be enough, just to like park the bike. But they burnt one of their jackets. It was like $500. Like they were like, no, I'm all in. I'm burning this. Apparently it smelled horrible. But like people like burn it and make sure that it hurts. Like, as in make sure it's something that you're really like, this is a symbol of how serious you are. And I was like, well, I don't have anything to burn. And I was trying to think about it. And I was, more than anything, it was just fear of man. And I was like, I'll burn my sunnies. I was like, I'll burn my sunnies because, well, they were pretty expensive when I bought them 5 years ago, and I actually want another pair anyway. So this is a really great chance to do something really holy, just playing a system again. This is a true story. And so I get there and I have like my speech prepared, like of all my stuff, what I'm going to say. And I take off my sunnies and I throw them in. And I've had burning in my heart and in the back of my mind the entire week, but especially now that I'm up there in front of my class, 3 words, which was burn the watch. It is not the watch I'm currently wearing, but the words burn the watch. And this made absolutely no sense to me. And I'm like just stuck there, and you could see that the class is like, is he done? And I'm just like having this like full-on dialogue with God, like I'm just, speaking in tongues and going nuts, kind of get this right. And I'm like, fine. And I literally just take off my watch, and as soon as I took a leap of faith and took it off, suddenly it just dropped like a pin as to why God wanted me to do that. And this watch that I had, I wish I had a photo of it, but this watch that I had was one of a kind. It was a present that Dad had brought back from England for me. I had it for about 10 or 12 years, brought it for one of my birthdays, and he had a matching one. So I had a gold and silver, I had a black and gold. No, sorry, back up. I had a black and silver, he had a black and gold, and they were matching. And I was like, do I need to ask for his permission? Is he going to be devastated I'm going to burn this? But as soon as I took it off, I actually just burst into tears. I was just a mess. I was an absolute mess. And I was like blubbering, trying to get the words out. I feel even emotional talking about it now, but it was, Dad, I really love you and I value everything that you've ever given me, but I'm terrified to agree with anything that you wouldn't agree with. And I had realized in that moment that all the teaching from Hillsong and all the teaching at this new place, I was rejecting because I didn't think Dad would like it. I didn't care if it was in the Bible or not. I'm like, if he doesn't agree, I can't agree. I can't do it. And so I've said, thanks for everything, but I'm going to choose to be my own man now. And I took off the watch and I threw it in the drum. I just like bawled my eyes out. And it was in that moment I just felt something in the spirit just break off me. And actually from that moment on, I've just had this hunger. Like, I'm not perfect, just ask my family, I'm so many issues I have, but I'm not perfect, but actually my hunger and my devotion to God, I can honestly say from that moment has been pure. Yes, I make mistakes all the time, but actually from that moment I was like, no, God, I want to know you, because I'm desperate to be your son and know what that's like. And actually it wasn't to to prove arguments, like to prove my point in an argument. It wasn't to play a system. It wasn't for the affirmation of my parents. It was for the first time in my life, really, really pure. And so for me, as I start to close, I actually want to leave you guys with this point, or with this thought of like, it doesn't matter what family you come from. It doesn't matter if you come from an atheist home, Islamic, Buddhist, Christian pastor's kid. You at some point in your life need to make that call for yourself. That actually there is no such thing as grandchildren in the kingdom of God. God only has kids. No one gets saved via association. And that is not to scare you. If you're in the youth group, you're like, damn, this guy's serious. But that's not to scare you. It's actually supposed to be exciting. It's actually supposed to be really, really exciting that actually the Lord of the heaven and earth, the creator of everything that was and is to come, actually in the best way possible doesn't care who you know. He just wants to know you. And I can safely say that I don't identify as the second son anymore. That actually I identify as a true son, and a son that actually is desperate to know my dad. My earthly dad, we have a great relationship. I love Dad. But a relationship with my heavenly Father is so much more valuable. And so I've actually never closed one of these before. I'm assuming I'm going to invite you back up. But as I start to close, I just want to leave you with that thought of actually like, is that something that regardless of your upbringing or where you've come from, that you personally have made for yourself? And if you haven't, well, there is no better time than the present. And actually, Jesus would love for you to have a relationship with him. Awesome. Thanks, guys, for listening.